Build, An Unorthodox Guide to Making Things Worth Making by Tony Fadell. Picture this, it's 2007, and you're standing in a room with Steve Jobs. In just 5 months, he's going to walk onto a stage and unveil something that will reshape human existence. The very first iPhone. Right now, he's holding the prototype, turning it over in his hands. The screen is plastic, scratched and marked from bouncing around in his pocket with his keys. He looks up at his team, some of the sharpest minds in technology, and drops a bomb. I'm not shipping a product that gets scratched. I want a glass screen, and I want it perfect. The room goes silent. They're already months behind schedule, pulling all-nighters, living on caffeine and determination. What he's asking for? It borders on fantasy. The glass he has in mind doesn't technically exist yet. Redesigning the screen means tearing apart the entire device and starting over. It means gambling Apple's future on a hunch, on something that feels right, even when the data says it's impossible. These are the moments that separate legendary products from forgotten ones, and Tony Fadell, the author we're diving into today, has lived through dozens of them. Tony Fadell isn't just another tech executive with a book deal. He's the mind behind the iPod, leading the team through its first 18 generations. He helped birth the first 3 versions of the iPhone. After Apple, he founded Nest Labs and revolutionized something as mundane as the thermostat, eventually selling to Google for over $3 billion. His journey has been anything but smooth. He's experienced crushing defeats in tiny leaking garages and dizzying victories in Silicon Valley's most iconic headquarters. He learned from the best, including Jobs himself, and survived some truly terrible bosses along the way. In his book Build, he's packed 30 years of battle-tested wisdom into what he calls a mentor in a box. This isn't another fluffy business book drowning in theory. It's raw, honest, and intensely practical, a blueprint for making things that actually matter. Today, we're going to walk through his remarkable story together. By the time we're done, you'll understand the unconventional principles behind some of the most influential products of our era. You'll discover how to recognize a genuinely great idea, how to assemble a team capable of achieving the seemingly impossible, and crucially, how to develop yourself into someone who can genuinely change the world. This is the handbook for anyone determined to create something meaningful. Let's dive in. So where does a legend like Tony Fadell actually start? Not with a sleek white iPod or the game-changing iPhone. His story begins, like so many great ones, with failure, the kind that makes you question everything. Before Apple ever entered the picture, young Tony landed what he thought was his dream job at a company called General Magic. This was the early 90s, and the company was essentially a secret society of tech rock stars, the same brilliant minds who had created the original Macintosh. Their vision was breathtaking, and decades ahead of its time, a handheld device that functioned as a phone, computer, and entertainment system rolled into one. Basically, they were building the iPhone in 1989. Fadell threw himself in completely. The team worked around the clock, sometimes sleeping at the office, fueled by Diet Coke and the absolute conviction that they were creating the future. They were tunnel-visioned, heads down, each person obsessing over their tiny piece of the puzzle. As Fadell explains, that's how most young people approach their early careers. You're so absorbed in your specific task, the code you're debugging, the design you're perfecting, that you never look up to see the bigger picture. You assume your leaders, your heroes, have everything figured out. Except at General Magic, nobody had it figured out. After years of delays and burning through millions of dollars, they finally launched. The product was a technical masterpiece, and it sold maybe 5,000 units, mostly to people who knew someone on the team. The company collapsed, taking Fadell's dream with it. The experience was devastating. But from those ashes emerged the most crucial lesson of his entire career, a philosophy he returns to constantly: do, fail, learn. He discovered that adulthood isn't where learning stops, it's where real learning finally begins. School conditions you to fear failure. You take a test, get a grade, move on. But in the real world, especially when you're creating something nobody has seen before, failure is your greatest teacher. Your 20s, he argues, aren't about finding a perfect career path. They're about following your curiosity wherever it leads, not some business school formula. Expect the companies you join to fail. Expect your brilliant ideas to crash and burn. The only real failure in your 20s is staying frozen in place. Everything else is just experimentation. This is the foundation of building. You have to build yourself first, and that starts with choosing the right opportunities. Fadell's guidance here is simple but profound. Don't chase money, chase knowledge. He tells young people to seek out companies that aren't just improving existing products. Find the ones starting revolutions. Look for companies tackling real problems that frustrate people every single day. The best ideas, he writes, are painkillers, not vitamins. You can forget to take a vitamin for weeks and barely notice. A painkiller solves something so annoying you can't ignore it. That's why General Magic failed. They built a vitamin. In the early 90s, nobody felt genuine pain from not having a computer in their pocket. But Palm, their competitor, solved a real ache. People were exhausted from juggling messy address books and calendars. Palm created a digital organizer that fit in your pocket. Simple painkiller. And it dominated. This understanding leads to the next critical phase in building your career, managing people. Fadell is refreshingly honest about this transition. Becoming a manager is a discipline you learn, not a natural talent. And the moment you step into that role, you stop doing what made you successful originally. If you were an exceptional designer, you're not designing anymore. You're now responsible for human beings. Your days become filled with communication, hiring, firing, budgets, and endless meetings. Many people fall into the micromanagement trap. They got promoted because they were the best engineer on the team, so they try to stay the best engineer by controlling every detail of their team's work. This, Fadell insists, is poison. Your job as a manager is caring about outcomes, not dictating every step of the process. Steve Jobs would examine individual pixels with a jeweler's loupe to ensure perfection. That wasn't micromanagement. That was caring deeply about the final result. Micromanagement is when you tell your team exactly how to design that pixel. This brings us to one of the most crucial tensions in any creative project, the battle between data and opinion. When you're creating something genuinely new, data can't tell you if you're on the right track. You can run focus groups until you're blue in the face. But as Fadell learned at Philips, customer panels can't design for you. People naturally gravitate toward what's familiar, even when it's terrible. This creates what he calls analysis paralysis, where teams become so terrified of making the wrong choice that they make no choice at all, testing endlessly until the project suffocates. The first version of any product, what he calls version 1, is a leap into the unknown. It must be driven by vision and conviction. This is where the iPhone keyboard story becomes crucial. The data was crystal clear. Everyone loved BlackBerry's physical keyboard. Fadell himself seriously doubted that tapping glass could ever feel satisfying. The marketing team was convinced it would bomb. But Steve Jobs had a vision. Physical keyboards were limiting. They locked you into one language, one configuration. They consumed half the screen, making videos impossible to enjoy. His vision was a magical sheet of glass that could transform into whatever you needed. It was a gut-driven decision, and he told the team, either you're on board right now, or you're off the team. But vision alone isn't a magic bullet. Even Steve Jobs got it wrong sometimes. The original iPod concept was that it would be a secret weapon to sell more Mac computers. It only worked with Macs. The first generation launched, to critical praise but disappointing sales. Why? Because almost nobody owned a Mac. The team approached Steve and argued that version 2 had to work with Windows computers. Steve refused flat out. Absolutely not. That would undermine the entire strategy. But this wasn't a version 1 product anymore. They weren't flying blind. They had real customer data now. For a version 2 product, Data and customer feedback have to lead, and the original vision has to adapt. After a fierce internal battle, Steve reluctantly agreed to make the iPod compatible with PCs. Sales exploded overnight. Making the iPod work for everyone is what saved Apple. And ironically, millions of delighted iPod customers eventually got curious and bought Mac computers, fulfilling Steve's original vision, just not the way he imagined. This captures the essence of building great products. You launch with a strong, vision-driven version 1. Then, for versions 2 and 3, you listen carefully to your customers, study the data obsessively, and refine relentlessly. He calls this the 3 generations cycle. Generation 1 is about discovering product-market fit. You're essentially shipping a sophisticated prototype to innovators and early adopters who forgive bugs. You'll probably lose money. Generation 2 is about fixing everything you messed up initially and reaching mainstream early adopters. This is where you might start making a small profit per unit, achieving positive gross margins. Generation 3 is where you optimize the business itself. You've refined the product. Now you focus on reducing costs, expanding distribution, and finally making the entire operation profitable. The iPod took 3 years and 3 generations to become truly profitable. The iPhone followed the exact same pattern. But what actually is the product? This is where Fadell offers one of his most powerful insights. The product isn't just the object in the box, it's the entire customer journey from start to finish. He shares the story of the Nest thermostat, the team obsessed over the physical device, the elegant design, the satisfying click of the dial, the electronics. But Fadell realized the device itself was only 10% of the customer's actual experience. 70% of their interaction happened through the app on their phone. The other pieces, the website, the advertising, the packaging, the installation process, were equally critical. If any single link in that chain broke, the whole experience collapsed. To make this abstract journey concrete, he insists you must prototype the entire thing. For Nest, this started with designing the box. The physical constraints of packaging forced them to be ruthless about prioritization. What was the single most important message a customer needed to see? What came second? Every word on that box became the foundation for their website copy, their advertisements, their talking points in interviews. This process led to one of their most brilliant and beloved innovations, the Nest screwdriver. During user testing, they discovered that installing the thermostat took people about an hour. But when they examined the data closely, they realized the actual installation only took 20 minutes. The other 40 minutes were people digging through junk drawers, hunting for the right screwdriver. Most companies would have just slapped 20-minute installation on the box and called it done. But Nest wanted that first moment with their product to spark joy, not frustration. So they included a custom-designed, beautiful little screwdriver in every box. This transformed a moment of annoyance into a moment of delight, but it did something more. That screwdriver lived in people's kitchen drawers for years. A constant, subtle reminder of the thoughtful brand behind it. It was a tiny detail, but it communicated everything about the company. We care about every single moment of your experience. And that story is everything. Fadell learned the art of storytelling from Steve Jobs, who never simply presented a product, he presented a narrative. Before revealing what the iPhone was, he spent 10 minutes explaining why you desperately needed it, reminding everyone how frustrating their current smartphone really was. Fadell calls this planting the virus of doubt. You make people genuinely annoyed about the current state of things, so they're primed and excited for your solution. A powerful product story does 3 things. It speaks to both logic and emotion. It makes complex ideas instantly graspable, and it always focuses relentlessly on the why. The legendary tagline, 1,000 songs in your pocket, wasn't just listing features. It was telling a story. It used an analogy to grant customers superpowers, a way to immediately understand something revolutionary, and, crucially, a message they'd naturally repeat to their friends. This philosophy of building, driven by narrative, obsessed with the customer journey, and refined over generations, guides products toward success. But what about building the business itself? Here, Fadell shares his journey founding Nest. The idea for a smart thermostat didn't strike him like lightning. It followed him around for 10 years. It started as a personal frustration. His ski cabin was always freezing when his family arrived on Friday nights. He tinkered with solutions for years, but the technology wasn't ready yet. The idea would fade, then come roaring back, following him across the world until he finally accepted that he was the one who had to solve it. A great idea, he argues, stalks you. Even after you discover how impossibly difficult it will be to execute, you can't stop thinking about it. This is what he calls delayed intuition. Before you leap, you need months or even years to research, plan, and test whether the idea can survive your own skepticism. Once you commit, the first step is assembling your team. He says you should know your first 5 hires before you even officially start. And your early team should include what he calls seed crystals, people so talented and respected that they naturally attract other exceptional people. As the company grows, it inevitably hits what he calls breakpoints. These are predictable moments when your team's communication and organization simply stop working. The first happens around 15 people, when informal chats are no longer sufficient. The next comes around 50, when you need managers managing other managers. Then again at around 120, when you need formal directors and established processes. The secret is anticipating these breaks and restructuring proactively before everything falls apart. This leads to his final and perhaps most dramatic set of lessons, what it truly means to be a chief executive. The climax of Fadell's story is Nest's acquisition by Google. On paper, it looked perfect. Nest had the brand, the product vision, and the design philosophy for the connected home. Google had the resources, the artificial intelligence, and the infrastructure to accelerate that vision by years. But from day one, the cultures clashed violently. Fadell describes Nest as a team of fighters, forged in Apple's near-death intensity. They were scrappy, mission-obsessed, and accustomed to top-down leadership where the chief executive could clear roadblocks with a single decision. Google, meanwhile, was a culture of abundance, funded by its seemingly infinite advertising revenue. It was less hierarchical, and leaders couldn't simply command teams to help. They had to persuade, to build consensus. The two companies were speaking completely different languages. Then, barely a year after the acquisition, Google announced a massive corporate restructuring, creating the parent company Alphabet. Nest was suddenly separated from Google, cut off from the very resources it had been promised. The deal they'd signed up for had evaporated. Fadell was told to slash his team and roadmap in half. Then, he learned Google wanted to sell the company entirely. It was brutal and agonizing. Fadell eventually resigned, unable to lead a company whose vision was being dismantled from above. He uses this painful experience to illustrate the immense weight and isolation of being a chief executive. Your job, he explains, is simply to care about everything. To scrutinize support articles with the same intensity as product design. Your passion, or lack of it, cascades down and sets the standard for everyone. He divides chief executives into 2 categories, babysitters and parents. Babysitter executives are caretakers. They maintain what exists, avoid risks, and keep shareholders content. Most public company leaders are babysitters. Parent executives, however, push companies to grow and evolve. They take big swings. They challenge their teams to reach for greatness, even when it hurts. This is the kind of leader Fadell urges us to become. But nobody can be the chief executive forever. The final chapter of leadership is recognizing when to step back, when to unbecome a leader. Whether it's because the company has outgrown you, you've lost your fire, or you simply need to create space for the next generation to rise. In the end, he says, 2 things matter: products and people. The things you build define your career. The people you build them with define your life. Even when products fail, Even when companies die, relationships endure. The lessons learned, the bonds forged in the heat of creation, that's what lasts. As we reach the end of Tony Fadell's journey, it's obvious that Build is far more than a business manual. It's a deeply human story about the messy, beautiful, and often painful process of creation. The most powerful lesson for me isn't about technology or marketing strategies. It's about persistence when everything falls apart. Fadell's story isn't a highlight reel of victories, it's a collection of scars, each one marking a lesson learned the hard way. His mantra, do, fail, learn, is deceptively simple, yet it's the foundation of every meaningful achievement. In a world that celebrates overnight success and worships perfect resumes, his honesty feels like fresh air. He gives us permission to be imperfect, to try things that might crash spectacularly, and to see failure not as the end but as tuition paid for wisdom. The idea of prototyping the entire customer journey is another concept that sticks with you. We often become so fixated on the thing we're making, the app, the presentation, the artwork, that we forget about everything surrounding it. The story of the Nest screwdriver perfectly illustrates how small, thoughtful details create lasting emotional connections. It challenges us to look beyond our narrow focus and experience the world through our customers' eyes at every touch point. And finally, his distinction between babysitter and parent leaders is a powerful framework for any level of leadership. It's not just for executives. Are we simply maintaining the status quo in our own lives and projects? Or are we pushing ourselves and those around us to grow, to evolve, to reach for something better? It's a call to embrace the discomfort of growth over the safety of stagnation. So how can you apply these ideas to your own life starting today? Here are a few practical actions inspired by the book. First, practice fighting habituation. For the next week, identify one small daily annoyance you usually ignore. Maybe it's how your backpack is organized, a frustrating step in your morning routine, or a confusing feature in an app you use constantly. Instead of just accepting it, ask yourself Fadell's favorite question, why? Why does it work this way? How could it be just 1% better? This simple exercise trains your mind to see the world not as it is, but as it could be. Second, for your next project, whether academic or personal, start by writing the press release first. Before doing any work, write a single paragraph explaining what it is, who it's for, and why anyone should care. This forces you to clarify your vision from the beginning and gives you a guiding star when you get lost in details. And third, think about your own customer journey. If you're applying for college or a job, don't just focus on the final deliverable, your application or resume. Think about the entire experience from the perspective of the admissions officer or hiring manager. How will they first hear about you? What appears when they search for you online? How will you follow up after an interview? Every interaction is a chance to tell a thoughtful, cohesive story. That was a summary of Build by Tony Fadell. We've explored some of the biggest ideas today, but a summary is like viewing a map of a beautiful country. It shows you major cities and highways, but it can't convey the feeling of walking through bustling markets, the taste of local food, or the wisdom gained from conversations with people who live there. The real magic of this book lives in the details, the personal stories, the raw honesty, and countless small lessons packed into every page. If any of the stories or principles we discussed today resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning business strategy. It's an experience that can fundamentally reshape how you approach your work, your career, and your life. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know this work matters to you and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another transformative book. Let's keep building and learning together.